Welcome back. Joining me today is one of the people who knew that I was going to be doing this probably before just about anyone, because this had to do with one of our last assignments in our MBA. Katherine Fryday is joining me. She was in my first group during my MBA at the greatest university in the country. Katherine, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dan. I'm really excited. I'm glad that you've taken this up and inviting me on the show.
Well, if anything, I am true to my word. So
I agree.
You knew we were gonna be doing this, and I'm glad you were able to take some time out of your busy schedule in the windy city of Chicago. How is Chicago these days?
It's wonderful. Now that I've finished my MBA, I suddenly have time to do something like this. Where if you'd asked me like 3 weeks ago, I would have been like, are you crazy? I still have to write 5 assignments and graduate. So now there's a lot of time.
Yeah, and we had to write those 5 assignments in like a week because it was just one thing after another with all of our assignments.
I'm finding that even like post MBA, everything for me is one thing after another. It's almost like all the things I forgot to do before have like piled up so completely that I'm just jumping over hoops again and again. So I can't wait to I'm really trying to wrap my arms around life again. Even though during COVID, there's nowhere to go, it just seems like I'm still as busy as I was before.
Right. So, I'm curious to start this off as to one, why you chose to do an MBA. What were your kind of goals through this? And did you get out of it what you thought you were going to?
Something I've been reflecting on a lot. I didn't really have a specific goal. When I went to Michigan and I met, say, you or some of our other classmates, they had I feel like more defined goals than what I did. I came from myself. I came to show up for myself and to show that I can make it happen. And then when I entered, I wasn't really super confident. And now that I've finished the program, I am so proud of myself for having done what I've done. And that's enough for me. I didn't go to change my career necessarily. I just went to make myself smarter. I definitely feel like I got there. Is that a fair answer?
Sure. I mean, it's however you want it to be. For me, I did have goals. I mean, and it was also for myself to first and foremost better myself. I mean, why turn down any type of learning opportunity? And while you were, and still are in the marketing field, I was looking to fill some gaps on the business side because, well, as a technologist, everything is about technology, but in business, technology is just one component. And I wanted to learn how to speak that language of business and marry the technology and business together, because I wasn't doing direct, business functions. I just supported them all. So
do you think
I achieved what I wanted to.
Do you think that throughout the program that maybe you found things that you weren't really expecting? That was true for me. I didn't realize how well the whole education would go together. There just seems to be a very well-rounded approach throughout the program that kind of opened my eyes to other things. Not necessarily just the business language, but even just kind of thinking about the world in a different way. Was that something true for you as well?
Yeah, in many ways, I would say yes. The way the program flowed was, I thought, very well put together. I mean, it was almost like a 12-course meal. They knew how to hit all aspects of our mental palate, if you would, so to speak. And in some cases, with some of the wine that was brought in, they hit into that type of the palate as well. But they did. I mean, they get a good mix. So this way the classes kind of flowed together and were able to somewhat snowball into the next, semester, or I don't even know what we called them, marking periods, whatever it was. But yeah, I found it to be done quite well. it really opened up. I mean, I will say, I prior to Michigan Ross, I didn't have that great of an appreciation for marketing. I do absolutely now, realizing how much data is really going on. And what I found is that marketing people are just like hackers. You all are just using the data
Yeah.
for the perception of good. I mean, it depends, maybe Facebook took it a little bit too far, but that's the same thing what bad actors, hackers out in the world are doing. The same thing. It's open source intelligence research. You're making it actionable, and they're exploiting people for bad. You all are kind of gray, but
Yeah. We're definitely looking at it from that perspective. I love like the education that I got from going through the program, like reinforced that all of the hunches I had about what I was doing were right. Like being in advertising, it's kind of the field that you fall into and then you just never get out of. So I felt that going through the program, I learned so much, even in those marketing classes, of how to apply the data, like how to really look at the insights differently, how to draw like conclusions and build a better argument. And I was able to take that back to work like pretty much immediately. And definitely in the new role I have, I'm using that and exploiting those like skills that I built there like every single day.
yeah, I am still bitter about our first marketing class where we had to talk about, the chicken contact lenses. And the reason why I'm bitter is in my paper, I actually said, I don't think this guy should go into manufacturing. This is an intellectual property play. And he gave me a bad grade for it. I did all the calculations, and I'm like, this is an intellectual property play. And then we come to find out at the very end what the guy did. It was an intellectual property play. He sold his patents.
Yeah.
I'm so mad. I'm still mad at that. Puneet, at some point, you and I are gonna have a conversation about this.
Well, I wrote that paper and I came to the same conclusion. And then I looked back at Puneet's slides and I looked back at what the ask of the assignment was. And I went and rewrote the assignment because I'm like, that's not what he wants me to do, even though I think it's the right thing to do. So I completely support your position. I remember finishing that paper and being like, this looks really short and very too logical. Someone wants something more complicated.
Well, I mean, I went into the aspect of my experience in dealing with patents and how much patents cost around the world in terms of buying them from different research facilities. And I'm like, this guy could make bank from doing this. But, that's okay because I still got quite a bit out of the rest of his class. It was fine.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the grade on the paper.
Those chickens followed me for months.
Now, the funny thing is, my buddy that I do This Life in Tech with, my other show, he, years ago, when we were both teaching in the doctorate program at Cap Tech, I started going around telling everyone the reason why he was moving to North Carolina was to become a chicken farmer. Okay. I had people believing me, and they'd go up to him and he's like, what are you talking about? Well, he's got like, I don't know, 100 chickens or something showing up either this weekend or next weekend. So I said, look, you should put contact lenses in them so that way they don't become cannibals. And he's like, what are you talking about? So I had to show him the paper. And there's something now on Amazon where it's more like shades where it kind of blinds their vision, but you kind of, somehow get them on. Yeah.
What?
He didn't believe me.
Like sometimes those papers and like the cases that we read, I was like, you have to be kidding me. And that was the first time I read something. I thought business school was going to be super serious, and that was the first time my phone just started blowing up from like WhatsApp. People were all like making jokes about chickens, and like it really kind of opened up the experience for me when people started to like bond over this ridiculous like chicken case that I never thought people would be as human as they were when we were talking about chickens.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I would still say, I don't know which class was my favorite. it kind of comes down to maybe the strategic brand marketing one, when we had to do the simulation with the cars.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed that class. A lot. I mean, of course, all of the, even the last class with Scott, I really enjoyed in getting into the theory about how we provide a positive work environment and why those things matter. We took the positive leadership class
Yeah.
together as well, which was fabulous. Are you planning on going back and taking the other exec ed classes?
Yeah, actually, I do want to take the strategic. There's like that strategy one and also the digital marketing one, which seems a bit odd because I work in digital marketing, but I'm also looking for, I think Michigan does a great job of putting leadership in everything that they do, right? So when you think about digital marketing, I'm thinking about how do I show leadership with that in a new fashion? And I think that even just doing it would give me new ideas. So yes.
Yeah, and they have one that's on there right now. It's completely online for like $600. I don't know what our discount would be on it, but it's another it goes on for about 4 months,
Yeah.
and it's like once a week. It's another type of leadership class that's on there, and I was like, well, who knows how long this COVID stuff's going to last? I mean, maybe I might as well do it, or I might do something else crazy, like, well, I don't know. I already shaved my head, so I don't know if there's too much other stuff I could do crazy. Got the show.
Yeah, well, you shaved your head. I'm not going to shave my head, but I'll definitely look at that class.
So, like, with you, are you kind of in quarantine in Chicago, or are you going into the office?
Well, so I already worked at home. Like last year I transitioned to freelancing and was finishing out my last semester of school. So now I got a new job. I just started 3 weeks ago, which is going well. I'll put it that way. But yeah, still in quarantine and still working at home. I'm very lucky to have my own dedicated office to go to work in. But I am
Nice.
looking forward to leaving this space.
Have you been taking this opportunity in quarantine to work on your stand-up comedy act?
Yeah, actually, I did. Do you want to hear the latest?
Let's hear it. Let's go.
Okay. What's a cowboy's favorite time? 10 to 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 to 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. What do you think?
Oh my gosh. So, many of you out there do not know this, but while Kat and I were in group together, she arranged for all of us to go to a comedy club. And the comic was not very good, and so Kat started heckling him. And he said, "You think you can do better?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And she got up on stage. Now, just the guts that it would take to get up on stage was one thing, but it was interesting. Her jokes were only slightly better than the one that she just told, but I can't remember. I don't even remember the jokes that you told her. We should have filmed it.
Oh, I do. Actually, I'll send you the tape if you want to take another
Oh,
laugh. It only proves out of the two of us, I am the funnier one.
well, you at least took a chance there. One, I mean, I can't believe you would start heckling the comic when we were like in the front row.
Oh yeah, I don't know who would do that.
So your MBA is now done.
Mhm.
You're working full time.
Yeah.
Are you still thinking about the one business idea that you were talking about?
You
I mean,
know,
we did have a case study on that.
yeah, I thought about this death business pretty seriously for a couple of semesters. I got so into it. I think it's still like a really solid business. Right now, it might be a bit difficult to enter this business. But Anil really shot
People
it.
are dying to get into it.
People are dying to get into it. I'm quite, yes, I can't make a joke out of that because it's quite serious at this point. But Anil kind of put a nail in that coffin, can I say? When we looked at the case and was like, okay, the consolidation, all the things that are happening in here, trust is the biggest issue. So I think my entry point has to be maybe talking with one of our MBA cohort, Ben. His parents own a funeral home, which I didn't know. And I think it would be really great to actually reach out to him and start getting like more information before I really start getting excited again. I've learned, I knew this from as a child, and it's very common in my personality. I'm a person who gets really, really excited about ideas, and then I need people to help me execute. And I think that's what I learned in the MBA is like how to tap into people to like make a network that can build a really successful idea. So you bring this back up again, like those are the things that are great about our cohort, and the connections that I've made.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because I did the majority of my undergrad was on campus. Now,
Mm.
I didn't go to school, traditionally. I went back after being an adult, and the place where I did my undergrad was called Strayer University, and they had campuses all around the DC metro area. So there was a lot of satellite campuses all over the place. So it's like, okay, if it was a late class, I could take a class like at 8 o'clock at night where I lived. If it was an earlier evening class, I wanted to make sure it was at a campus that was close by. And that's how I did my majority of my undergrad. Then I moved into doing online, or not, at George Washington was all on site. And then I went to Capital, where it was the graduate and doctorate program. Well, the graduate program was 100% online.
Mm.
The doctorate program was very similar to our MBA program. There were residencies, and you had to have like either 3 or 4 residencies, I don't recall, but we all did our classwork online, and the class was live online, where you showed up to class like we were doing at the end of our MBA for those last 2 residencies. Well, our classwork was once a week, all online, and there was no breaks. And then there was a residency like every like I think it was like 8 or 9 months, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I look back, my best friend Amanda that I met at George Washington, I talk to her like all the time. I don't talk to anyone from Strayer.
Oh, really?
I don't talk to anyone in my graduate program that I went to school with at Capital in my graduate. And in my doctorate program, I only talked to a handful of people, and mainly my buddy Jason. And now with Michigan Ross, and I talk to there's still group texts that are still going on all the time. And that's why I chose to do that program, was that I knew I was going to be interacting with everyone in person often, because I wanted to build those relationships.
Yeah, it's a really special experience. If I went to living in Chicago, obviously I have Booth School here and like Northwestern. And that was actually one of the first things that people asked me, why didn't you go to Booth? Like, why didn't you go to Northwestern, to Kellogg? I'm like, well, they never change teams, right? They never really explore like different dynamics. That's not a part of the program. And for me at Ross, the fact that you switch teams every semester, like it really sets you up for a different experience and knowledge that you can meet so many more people. And I'm really happy that I chose that direction, even though I could have gone to a different school here, quite much closer than in Michigan.
Yeah. So my friend Michael, I did my first show with, he went to George Mason, which is in the DC metro area. And their first several semesters or whatever that they did, the teams were randomly selected. But then after that, you had to form your own team.
Interesting.
So you had to interact not only with your team, but you were almost incentivized to let other people know what you could bring to the table, so then the other teams could form.
Man, isn't that going to be like being last picked in baseball or something? That's how it would feel for me.
Maybe it could be, who knows? But I thought that was kind of interesting,
Yeah.
because we had I think what is 122 people. I still didn't get an opportunity to talk with everyone and get to know a lot of them. I wish I did. I almost thought that there was going to be other types I actually didn't know what to expect, but as they were doing, I thought maybe things were going to you were going to be put into different groups all the time, but I see now why, while we were put into different groups, we, they didn't change as often as I thought maybe they were going to change.
Mhm. Yeah, I liked everyone when I was in a group with them, but it's interesting that whole idea of having to choose your own group. They say something about you being too friendly with people. Like they don't often make the best teammates as well. So with a system like that, I don't know whether I would be as successful because I would just want to be friends with everyone. And maybe I would get too close, and that makes it a little hard to, make the really hard decisions when you're in a team, right? And sometimes there really are those hard decisions that have to get made. So
Now, did you think that before we took our last class, where they talked about that? That concept of, hey, if you
yeah,
have a really good, your close friends are less likely to refer you for a job. Did you always think that?
yeah. Actually, one thing that stood out for me when Scott said that, I'm like, that makes sense. And before that experience, I had never really approached a strong friend for a job recommendation because they know me too well. So I never thought it from an analytical point of view in the way that Scott brought it up. But I think through just experience, I knew not to ask like my boyfriend to help me get a job. Like he knows the good and bad parts of me. And then, or like some of my girlfriends, I just would feel bad if I didn't perform well enough and it came back on them. That's the thing I'm always worried about when I get a referral. So yeah, maybe it's not as analytically as Scott put it.
The interesting thing is, I would say the majority of my good friends, we're not in the same field, so it's not something they could probably even help with. I would say the ones that I'm like super close with. Others, it tends to be the other way around. I seem to be bridging them into other jobs very much as that rainmaker like profile, because I'm like, oh, you're an application developer, okay, great. Because a lot of times the application developers don't talk to the security people, like they're just not in that same um, genre, so to speak, of technology. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. Interesting. I never thought, I like how Scott put in that final class, the reason you need kind of that sparse network a little bit and the things that you can get out of it. I never really had thought about it from that point of view at all. So I got a lot out of that class. Mostly the self-reflection, I think, is a great way to cap off the course, if that's how to say it, and just kind of give
Yeah.
yourself that opportunity to reflect on like how much you've done, right? And how well you've put yourself forward and the things that you've set out to achieve and where you could go from here.
Right. All right. So now you're a Ross graduate
I am.
from one of the, if not the best business school in the entire world.
Yes, I agree.
And all of these memes that are going around from COVID-19 saying that buy American. So one, for those who can't tell, Kat's not American. She's from this small little island out there in the Pacific called Australia.
Tiny.
So yeah. So all these people, and we kind of talked about this on our virtual happy hour we had a couple of weeks ago. What's the realistic possibility that the United States could bring manufacturing of all kinds back to the United States and away from China?
I don't think that it's like a very like highly likely thing. I think you have to let's take COVID out of this conversation, right? So because to talk about it with COVID, we need to start discussing what the new normal looks like. So would you agree? So let's
Sure,
take
take it out. Let's just say because there's plenty of people out there that believe we should be making everything in the United States regardless of this. So even before COVID, they're like, yeah, we got to bring back manufacturing.
Yeah, but like you can't make that claim, I think, is too broad. If you think about, I don't know, athletic shoes are a really good example. There's that American producer, I think it's Dunlop or sorry, I forget the name of it. There's this American producer here, and they have a lot of subsidies that are given to them by the government to really help them compete against imports. And that's true across a lot of different industries. And I just don't think it's necessarily possible that all of the things that, the government would like to have come back, be manufactured here, for it to actually happen. Why do you ask? What's your point of view?
Well, I asked because we talked about it. The first part that comes to mind from various classes that we took is
Yes.
that, the Chinese factory worker makes, roughly $2.20 an hour.
Yes.
But it's not just that. When we take a look at the culture of China, they also have invested so much into their workforce education. So we get cheap labor that's skilled at whatever that might be, putting, computer component parts together,
Mm-hmm.
or monitors or anything. Like, they're skilled at doing that for cheap labor. Well, in the United States, there's many that are talking about taking the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So I go, well, my math's not all that great, but 220 minus 15, I think that's $12.80 per hour. How long does it take to do things? From a cost perspective, that's going to be difficult.
Yeah. But you have to also, is business all about cost, right? Is it really? Is it, or is
Well,
it
no,
about
business.
America, right? So government here should be more investing in American manufacturing if they really want to bring it back. Yeah, all they seem to be doing is doing defense on American manufacturing and just offering subsidies.
Right. Now, well, we do know that business isn't all about cost. Business is all about shareholder value.
Yeah, but maybe the minor socialist in me is trying to come out in this conversation.
But I think that there is something that could be done in the United States.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is, and from a manufacturing perspective, because Americans still want high quality. So why couldn't we bring back the high quality manufacturing where you're going to pay a premium? So let's take a Mercedes as an example, from a car. So what could be the Mercedes of the cell phone industry? Because most of Apple stuff it's not made here either. So if we wanted to take something like that and make it a premium, then the minimum wage isn't as much of a factor because you're already paying a premium anyway. I mean, maybe like a Rolex watch.
Well, I think so. There, within the premium product that you're creating or assembling, right, there's going to be smaller components of that have to be manufactured. So I think where you're going is correct, and maybe it's more about assembling within the United States. I just can't see a world where microprocessors are all going to be made, within the United States at a premium cost, right? It's just such a step and repeat process that you need to be able to make it at scale to make that even worth the investment for a company to create. So
I mean, I absolutely agree. I don't think this is going to happen because the reason why, China also has other, issues that they can get around. Like, they don't have the same types of laws and regulations they have. Their people aren't desiring all the same things that we desire, and vice versa. I think that a lot of things the United States would have to change in order to bring manufacturing. Our culture has become much more of a consumption society.
yeah.
So, people seem to think that working with your hands is just not a good thing. And I kind of go, hey, if you so wanted and you're okay with, making X amount of money. I mean, we need electricians. A master electrician still makes 80 grand a year on average, right? What's wrong with that?
Yeah. I think we could learn a lot from countries like Germany that have these training programs as part of an education pathway, where America is not, to your point, investing in that idea of traineeships or internships that are using your hands or are going directly into manufacturing. Instead, they rely on these pool of people who live in less urban areas, perhaps in country towns, who need a factory and need those people to be employed, right? I don't necessarily think that's a sustainable model. There's a lot of people who might live in New York City who want to go into things like baking or being an electrician or a plumber, and they're not given that opportunity to do so. And you end up in this path of, I have to go to school, like I have to go to university. I end up with this huge debt. Is that right thing for everyone? I don't think so. And we can do a lot to help support people that way.
So as an MBA graduate,
Mm-hmm.
you're saying it's not really feasible to bring back manufacturing to the United States.
You're making a very absolute claim on what I'm saying. And I like to challenge that absolutes, because what did we learn, Dan, in school? It depends. Is the answer to everything.
It's the answer to everything. It's the answer to everything. People, what did they used to say though? The answer to everything was like 42. Was that what it was?
Something like that.
Yeah. No, the answer is it depends. I think the really hit part that you made is we can bring back some portions of manufacturing in the United States. However, this is a world economy where every country has a piece in some way, shape, or form. We're not getting all of our natural resources from one particular area in order to make that microprocessor. And while a lot of the parts could be put together in China or somewhere else in Asia and shipped to the United States, and what you do with those parts, not necessarily the assembly, but even the programming aspect of that can be done anywhere. We are in a much more of a symbiotic relationship in the world than where we've ever been before. And if we wanted to say to bring things back on par with China, it's no longer the norm that we should expect without having to sacrifice and move back many generations. I mean, the reason why the United States became such an industrial powerhouse was because, well, we had to because of the war. And then we stopped. And there's nothing wrong with that. We've shifted into thinking and coming up with a lot of the ideas. And it just so happens to be that, China and other countries just happen to have the skills and the labor requirements for us to manufacture there. But like, I don't blame, I think China has different issues when it comes to COVID, but the aspect that we're choosing to make PPE in China and Japan does not bother me. It's up to the United States companies to ensure the quality is still there.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like for something like PPE, I saw the president went to Honeywell the other day, and they've turned their factory around to creating these N95 masks. I think there is an element for that specific type. We're going to focus on this for a second, that we actually secure that for ourselves. I think almost that's a homeland defense item that we need to check the box on and make sure that we have enough for ourselves. I know I sound like totally the wrong human right now, but every country has to have an opportunity to create it for PPE for themselves if we're talking about the COVID world. But in general, yeah, the world is really flat, right? And we've been successful.
Wait a minute, you think the world is flat? You're a flat earther?
That is a different thing.
This just in.
You always try to twist around what I'm trying to say. But
I would never.
I did look into that. Flat earthers are becoming a big deal. So, now maybe is the time to get onto the bandwagon. But you think about where globalization has, we grew up in a time when the internet came online, and then it was just this very quick, increase into this global world. Now everyone just really focuses on what they're good at, right? And that's how it should be.
I tend to agree. Now, this is something that's interesting, and I'm not a huge fan of Elon Musk as a in general, but he said something interesting the other day, in that he thinks too many smart people are in finance and law, and that if those same types of smart people went and did something else, we would have better creations in the world.
So I'm not a huge fan of Mr. Musk either. I don't know if I agree with what he named his new child either.
Yeah. I'm not even sure how to pronounce that. X Ash something. I don't know.
But I think he has a point, right? While maybe I'm not a huge fan of what he's up to or how he approaches tasks, I think he has a point. There are a lot of like smart people locked in these professions that are just about, you know, driving a revenue number when they could really apply their brains or their thoughts to another area to improve other things going on in the world, not just like finance, law, and like being a doctor. They're not where all the smart people should go. You know, there's a lot of things in the world that could be addressed with their minds.
Yeah, and that was the other part, as you talked about the internet and how things were flowing. That's what kind of brought me to his conversation on the Joe Rogan show. And the other part of that was he thinks in 10 years maximum that we're going to have this neural network in our brains that we can all be linked together and we won't have to use words in 10 years.
Can that be now? Because I'm so tired of typing. Like,
we're all going to be the Borg. It's going to be the Borg from Star Trek.
I like was listening to this podcast once, and the guy had like hooked up a computer, you know, to himself, right? And they consider him, you know, it was considered one of the first cyborg kind of situations. But he just done it so that he could remind himself of things, of all, like, you know, birthdays. So he met someone, he'd be like typing their birthday, and then it would just like go into this memory, and then it would come up when he next saw that person, being like, hey, Dan's birthday is XYZ and his favorite color is green. So he would have this screen on his eye. He'd be like, hey, Dan, how's that green world you living in? Like, how is that happening for you? And I want that to be for me. Like, I just want a computer permanently attached to me because my brain doesn't absorb those details. And I'd love not to have to like type anymore, because being put in this COVID world, like all I'm doing is on Teams chat all day. Can you help me? Can you help me? Send me this. Can you help me? And I'm just so tired.
So let's say this happens, right? And we get into this 10 years from now. You know, in our last class as well, we had the that lady from Bank of America. I can't remember her name off the top of our head as a guest speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she talked about not wanting to put cameras on because of an economic, you know, disparity between classes of people. Well, what do you think this is going to do but to the 10x? Because the people who are going to have this first are the ones that are going to be able to certainly afford it, and the haves are going to be even more of a have, because the have-nots, I mean, forget about needing a camera to do video conferencing. They're not going to have the same neural network going on.
I think you're right. I don't think there's any way around it, though. The rich are always going to be able to access things first. So what would be your solution or thought to perhaps bringing it to a different class of people?
I don't necessarily know one way or another if it should. I mean, I think all of us have an opportunity to be as great as we want. We tend to hold ourselves back. We let others take away our dreams. And, you know, here, you know, you went from Australia to Canada to the United States. I don't know if you lived in other countries. I can't remember or not. But you made it here. You had a desire. You then graduated from the best business school in the entire world, on, you know, in many ways because of your desire, your push. You didn't let people take this away from you. Everyone has that opportunity, and they make a choice in some ways because they're, you know, the public library exists. They can go there if they want. They make a choice in some way or another. They may not like their choices, but they can choose to do something positive or something negative. They can choose to pick up that book or not pick up that book. Eventually, it comes down to a choice as to whether or not you want to be more than what you are or what you were yesterday. And the thing that I learned in my undergrad, my sociology teacher, and I know this is arguing specific to general, but I think this is the point that he had made, that his mom raised him and his brother. He never knew his dad, and he lived in Baltimore City. And his mom said to them, my choice now is to make sure my great grandkids are not going to be living in Baltimore City. So Your job is to make sure your great grandkids, the only way that happens is by generation and generation to instill a little bit more into them than what they had. And that progressiveness is what's going to get a family to be permanently out of an inner city. Instead, a lot of us, I think we focus just on the present, not necessarily what our futures could be by simply picking up that book and reading it.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting point. Like, we're talking about this future technology that could like hook into your brain, and you know what is more powerful is like giving someone like inspiration and giving someone like those opportunities to really believe in themselves, and enabling them to give them the tools like a book to get there as well. So maybe we don't need to think about this technology. We need to think about those really human elements.
I tend to agree. You know, I've always believed that it's better to give more of yourself than to receive, because your legacy, if you take a look, you know, the oak tree is just as big from its roots than it is in the top. And that's the same thing I try to do with the people that work with me, interns that I've had, and just of everyone. That's just my philosophy, that I try to give more than I receive.
Yeah, actually, I've learned a lot from you, like listening to you talk about how you manage people or your approach to management, and then also hearing different people's perspectives from classes as well. And I really appreciate all the times that you've shared with me. Those things that, you know, you may feel like I'm not listening, but I definitely am absorbing.
Well, you know, this particular next part of it then comes from this, because Brandon, our classmate, giving me, you know, a hard time. So, Kat, it's time to pay Dr. Ford for those comments. It's for you, Brandon. What's next for Kat?
I think I want to embrace all the skills that I've learned and really think about ways that I can help other people. That's something that I'm really focused on thinking about. And I was doing some work before, like freelance or actually some volunteer work with local associations, and I'm going to go back to that. It's something that I really enjoyed doing. So I don't know, long term, I really just want to keep growing and commit to learning. But I don't have any other than going to Australia, hopefully to see my parents soon. Nothing that's
Oh, when is that? When do you anticipate doing that?
2022. I am just
Okay.
just based on current environment. Like until there is it's kind of scary. I don't know if you feel similarly, but not having to see them for 2 more years would be a little bit tough if there isn't a vaccine.
You know, I don't know if I'm necessarily so worried about a vaccine yet or not. You know, I go back and forth on this quite often. And part of what I look at is, this was our first response in the United States to in our lifetime, because, you know, swine flu didn't hit us like this, H1N1 didn't hit us like this, Ebola wasn't really here, and this is the first one to really make it into the United States, and this is how we reacted. What are we going to do the next time?
Yeah, it's scary.
Because we're not going to be able to control 330 million people and tell them that they're going to have to shut down for 2 months next time.
No, I am already scared by the current response, right? How unprepared we are. You know, my dad loves to call me every week and tell me how ridiculous this thing is. And he lives in a country of what, like less than 30 million people in Australia, and they're getting like 17 cases a day. And you come to Illinois and it's like 1,000 cases a day. It's just ridiculous, the size and scale of what we're going through. And I can't believe, I'm very disappointed in the government for not being as prepared as they could be.
You know, I don't know if I am or I'm not right now. I have not had enough to taking a look at the data that is not been, we'll say, tampered with, untarnished, unfiltered data. Because when we go back, I'm wondering, and I don't have a medical background, but I'm wondering if the way in which we're testing for this virus, are we testing at like the root of like just coronavirus, or are we testing all the way down to COVID-19?
So it's funny because like I just saw today Australia was like I've reached 140,000 tests of the 100,000 target, and then you hear about in the UK I have 100,000 target and whatever I've reached. I don't even know what they're testing here. I don't even know how to get tested. I don't know if I should get tested. Like I think it's so unclear. I can't even answer what they're testing for. You know.
And that's exactly my point. I don't know what they're testing for, because if they're just testing for coronavirus, I might have had the cold. If they're testing for uh, SARS to COVID-19, well, are they that granular? Because I mean, the report, I can't tell which report is real, and no one's really answering that question. So I have a hard time in knowing, is this the government? Is this the testing? Is this the news spin? So I'm hoping at some point I may have some time to actually digest this data to see what really happened from a forensic standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no discounting the people that have died. I mean, that's, regardless, it's, it's an unfortunate shame. And I do believe that the various forms of government, like in New York, everyone believes Cuomo's doing or many people think he's doing a good job. I don't think he is. I think he's actually done a bad job.
Mm.
Whereas I would never thought I would say California has done, I think, a reasonable job. When you talk about the populations, I mean, it's pretty much, the population of our country is pretty much in California, and it's in New York, and they're huge. So the extremes of them, I find different. The amount of hospital beds per 1,000 people in New York, that's Governor Cuomo's job, is to make sure we have enough hospital beds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the governor's job. That's not the president's job. And that's, I think, a lot of what people don't understand in the United States, and that the president can only do so much before, and because the governor has to do a lot more and then invite the federal government in. I mean, it's a whole different topic, but I would say government in totality failed us.
Mm. Yeah. I oh, this sounds going to sound terrible, but the head of the snake, like, it leads the body. So the thing that really frustrated me was how the federal government kind of flip-flopped on what their role was. Whether every individual governor, yes, definitely took, I felt, a lot more charge of their individual areas. Whether Como is good or not, I don't have a well-formed opinion. But what really frustrated me about the whole situation was that flip-flopping of the federal government, where you look at a country like Australia, it felt like, at least from here, federal government was like, X, we're doing this. State government was like, I'm doing this. Local right down to council level government was like, it felt very coordinated. And here I'm just like, can I go outside? I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell, right? I mean, this is the thing. I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from a lot of this when it comes to our government response is that if our leaders in government are only going to hire their friends to run the government agencies, then you're not getting my vote. I want someone that is responsible for that area, whether it be Health and Human Services. And I honestly, I don't know who the Secretary of HHS is at this point in time. It seems like it changes all the time. But I want experts in the cabinet, and I want experts in the governor for those areas. And I remember my uncle, who worked for FEMA and actually has gone back to work for FEMA after Katrina as a consultant. He had retired, and they called him back. He had said that one of the big reasons why he got out was because it seemed like the presidential appointees were just friends. and he got tired of having to train them on what they're supposed to know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was, I think that conversation I had with him was maybe 2004, 2005, something like this. And I'm thinking about that now, and I'm going, is that, I wonder if that's the real reason we've had this type of response, because we've put people in charge that just don't know.
No, yeah, it definitely feels that way. You know, I wish I could trust the government more. You know, the only person I think I have a good understanding of is Fauci, who I also think would make a great cartoon character. You know? Like a superhero. Can you imagine like the Fauci cape? You know, him as like a little character.
I would think kind of him as like the Robin to someone's Batman.
Yeah. He could be a good Robin.
Yeah,
But he's
that's
like
about it.
only person that I've seen come out, and I think because he came out from a government perspective, but then I heard him talking to the scientific community, right? And then I heard him on like another podcast. It was very like consistent with what he was saying, in regardless of like what audience that he had, that I felt he gained my trust really quickly.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I trust him or not, mainly because I don't trust anyone when it comes to anyone that's speaking like that often, that I believe has a political agenda at this point. It just feels that way to me, especially when they start talking about, everyone needs to be tested all the time and it needs to be tracked. No, I mean, I just start getting into, this is where my cybersecurity brain just goes, my clearance was compromised by the government. My health insurance stuff has been compromised. You name it, it's been compromised every step of the way. And now you want me to give you even more of my personal data and think that you're going to protect that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have zero trust when it comes to the government at this point.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be signing up for one of those apps that tracks you.
Definitely not.
We talked about this a few weeks ago, but even just not being an American and signing up for something like that, it scares me. So
It should. It absolutely should. Well, Katherine, do you have any final words of wisdom or a joke for today?
Gosh. What do you call it?
Though I hope your words of wisdom, I hope, are not the joke.
Oh, I don't know if I have words of wisdom, but I do think learning is very important, and I love what I've been through. But my joke is always going to be, what do you call a diploma in Australia? A qualification.
Oh my gosh. Well, one day, Katherine, I hope you will be able to actually get back up on stage and do your comedy routine. You've got to. You could definitely come up with one.
I'm looking forward to it, and I can't wait till we get to hang out again in person.
Yeah, and I hope you'll come back on.
I will.
We'll have some more fun again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And now we'll cut this. Bam, stop recording.